Hello, film fans. In 1967, this happened on American cinema screens.
We were just trying to clarify some of the evidence. Was Mr. Colbert ever in this greenhouse, say last night, about midnight?
Let's talk about In the Heat of the Night on this episode of What Makes This Film Great. In the Heat of the Night is a 1967 film that was directed by Norman Jewison. It was produced and distributed by United Artists, but also by the Mirisch Corporation. And the Mirisch Corporation specialized in sort of mid-budget, highbrow, or let's say adult films. The kind of films that a lot of people today complain about Hollywood isn't making anymore. And for a small company, they were heavy hitters. The Mirisch Corporation fostered relationships with directors, and those relationships were built on success, definitely, but also trust. So when you come to a film like In the Heat of the Night, it's very important that the Mirisch Corporation had a trustful relationship with Norman Jewison. In the Heat of the Night stars Sidney Poitier, who at that time was the biggest box office draw of any actor in America. It also stars Rod Steiger, Lee Grant, Warren Oates, and Larry Gates. Haskell Wexler did the cinematography. It was his first color film as a cinematographer in Hollywood. Hal Ashby edited the film and won an Academy Award for it. And it was written by Sterling Silliphant, based on the book by John Ball. What's In the Heat of the Night about? It's a very simple story with very deep layers. In Sparta, Mississippi, one night, a body turns up. A man has been murdered. He turns out to be a Chicago industrialist who's come down to Sparta in the hopes of opening a factory that the town is very excited about because it's going to provide this sort of backwater place with hundreds, maybe thousands of jobs. And here he is, dead. Rod Steiger is the chief of police, Gillespie, and because he's new in the job, it's very important to him to solve this case. The body turns up in the middle of the night, in the heat of the night, and as soon as it does, Gillespie sends his men out to scour the town for possible suspects. One of them, Police Officer Wood, played by Warren Oates, is sent to check the train station.
On your feet, boy. I mean now.
Get them hands high. You spread them fingers, I want to count all 10. And you move before I tell you to, boy. By God, I'm gonna clean your plow.
This man turns out to be Virgil Tibbs, and he's not just any suspect.
Yeah. In the meanwhile, you just killed yourself a white man, just about the most important white man we got around here, and picked yourself up a couple of $100.
I earned that money 10 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Colored can't earn that kind of money, boy. Hell, that's more than I make in a month. Now, where did you earn it?
Philadelphia,
Mississippi?
Pennsylvania.
Now, just what you do up there in little old Pennsylvania, earn that kind of money?
I'm a police officer.
And so all of a sudden you have this situation where, ooh, there's an easy suspect. Solve the case, Chief. No, he's a cop from Philadelphia. Gillespie gets on the phone with Virgil's boss, his chief of police up in Philadelphia, finds out the story's true. And then, in one of the film's first, for me, uncomfortable moments, Tibbs' boss recommends that Virgil stay in Mississippi and help them solve the case. Something that both he and Gillespie are reluctant to have happen. Gillespie doesn't want it to happen because, as I've said, he's new on the job and it's very important to him that he solve this case. Later, the town's mayor will help to convince Gillespie.
Now, look there. Suppose he turns up the killer. He has no police powers here. He's gonna have to hand him over on a platter, right? That's right. And if he fails, you're off the hook.
These two men are thrust together, and Tibbs doesn't have a choice. That's the thing here. Even though he's used to a sort of northern freedom, a 1967 freedom, he's still not free. Where Virgil is reluctant because he knows he's in a racist town with racist police where danger's around every corner, Gillespie's reluctant because he's a racist. Like, there's no hidden agenda here. He is straight up, pure and simple, a racist. He's offended that this guy might know more about the job than he does. This is the narrative backdrop of the film, and it's against this backdrop that the film's themes, both narratively and visually, play out. Because to be honest, the whodunit is not all that important. Yeah, there's a police procedural film here to watch, and it's interesting to wonder, did this person do it? Did that person do it? Did that person do it? But that's not what the film is about. I mentioned Haskell Wexler, the cinematographer, and he's very important for this film. First, it's a beautifully shot film. But a key point here is that Wexler was one of the first Hollywood cameramen to figure out or to understand or to even try to light and shoot a black man, black skin appropriately. One of the things Wexler realized was that different levels of light reflect differently off different complexions of skin. Today, this might seem to us like, yeah, no shit. But Hollywood, just like the rest of America, was so laden with, if not pure racism, that sort of racial or racist negligence that characterized so much of American industry, whether of the arts or otherwise, throughout the 20th century. That you can have a moment like this where Wexler says, maybe we should shoot Sydney with lower light. And people could be like, wow, you don't say. But it's very important for the film, not just in the way it allows us to better see Poitier's facial expressions, to better understand the emotions he's conveying with his expressions, but visually it prepares us. Early scenes in the film, when we get to see Poitier, when we get to see Tibbs behave in certain ways and express certain feelings, they prepare us in subtle ways for later moments in the film. Let's go back to that moment when Officer Wood first apprehends Tibbs. One of the things you can see there is the frustration in Tibbs' face. And it's important to note that, to feel that, because it will play out in various ways throughout the rest of the film. And if it hadn't been lit and shot the way it was, that might have been harder to discern for viewers. But there, even though the shot is through the arms like that, and even though it's not in a full close-up, Tibbs' emotions are clear. Let's look at another scene, still relatively early in the film, but incredibly important and incredibly beautiful. This is when Gillespie takes Tibbs to the morgue to examine the body of the murdered man. Watch how Tibbs' examination is filmed. Those shots of his hands in close-up, doing their job, doing the work that needs to be done, are so important in setting so many of the film's tones, so much of its thematic resonance later on. First of all, just for American eyes, long before the slap, which we'll come back to, you get this image of black hands handling a white body. You also get some reaction shots of the mortician and Gillespie watching this happen. But it's that the precision, the dedication to the job, combined with, let's face it, what would have been a racial taboo in America, not just in the South, but nationwide. And the camera chooses to put it in our faces. It's a fantastic series of shots there. Now, we're going to get a lot of close-ups of Tibbs' hands throughout the film as he does the kind of work that he has to do. But his hands also become important in another scene that would have been, let's say, a surprise to many Americans in the audience. This comes when Tibbs goes back to the police station and interviews Mrs. Colbert, the spouse of the murdered man.
Your husband is dead, Mrs. Colbert. Somebody killed him. We don't know who yet.
It's very hot in here. It's very hot in this room.
Sit down.
No. Would you leave me alone for a few minutes, please?
Here's a scene set in the Deep South where a black man from the North goes into a room alone with a white woman, closes the door, touches her, consoles her, talks to her like an equal. It had been less than a decade since Emmett Till had been murdered for talking to a white woman. This scene is striking. This scene is almost culturally revolutionary. And today we look at this and a lot of people look at it and they're like, what's the big deal? There was nothing like that in American cinema at the time. Wexler's choice to shoot a lot of the film with low light had other sort of interesting ramifications, including beautiful nighttime scenes. Some of them are thematic in nature, some of them just look fantastic, some are a little bit of both. Let's just watch a little bit of this scene outside the diner where Tibbs and Gillespie have one of their many confrontations.
I thought I told you to get the hell out of here.
I'm not ready to leave.
I was going to tell you all about that in the morning, Chief.
Ready? You forget about those 4 maniacs this afternoon?
I need more time.
Time? Do I have to put on the train myself?
I guess so.
Oh. All right, Virgil. Just what the hell do you want?
I want to know exactly where Sam Wood was at all times on the night of the murder.
Virgil, if you get killed, we're gonna have one hell of a mess in this town. You know that?
Besides looking fantastic, one of the great things about that scene is the way Gillespie's worried about Tibbs getting killed. Not because he's worried about Tibbs, because the town's already suffering because of the death of Colbert, and he doesn't want the town to suffer more. He also doesn't want to suffer because of this. I mentioned earlier that there was a stable of talent on this film that Jewison had worked with before. Wexler, but also Hal Ashby, the editor. And Hal Ashby and Norman Jewison had become very close and would continue to stay close. And Jewison would get Ashby his first directing job, another film about race relationships, on The Landlord in 1970. These guys worked great together. They believed in what they were doing. They had a sense that you could slip deep political thoughts, deep political themes into mainstream films. And they knew how to work with each other's work. What do I mean by that? I want to show you this great scene where the cinematography, the narrative, and the editing all come together.
Find anything?
Whoever killed Colbert drove this car last night.
How do you know?
Where you going? I'd drive up there in the car you gave me, but I'm sure you don't want me running up there by myself, causing more trouble.
Up where?
Eric Endicott's.
Endicott's. Oh, come on now.
None of that for you, huh, Virgil?
That cut to the thresher is just fantastic. It's unexpected, and it's so redolent of the violence of the situation, not only of the murder investigation, but of Tibbs's very presence, not only in Sparta, but in the location where they're going right now, which is to the home of Mr. Endicott, one of the town's richies, the cotton baron. And we see those cotton pickers as Tibbs drives through, and that fantastic remark, nasty remark from Gillespie about Tibbs's relationship to the labor that's being done around him. There you see how the editing, the story, the themes, and the cinematography are all working together to tell us something more than just they're going to interview Endicott. And it's at that interview with Endicott where the slap happens. And I believe all the stuff we've seen leading up to that, editing, cinematography, framing, lighting, are in preparation for that scene. Let's watch it again, only a little bit longer.
Have you a favorite, Mr. Tibbs?
Well, I'm partial to any of the epiphytics.
Why, isn't that remarkable? That of all the orchids in this place, you should prefer the epiphytics. I wonder if you know why.
Maybe it would be helpful if you'd tell me.
Because, like the Negra, they need care and feeding and cultivating. And that takes time. That's something you can't make some people understand. That's something Mr. Colbert didn't realize.
Is this what the epiphytics root in?
My point. They thrive on it. Take it away from them, they do poorly.
What do you call this material?
That's osmondin, fern root.
Well, we don't want to take any more of your time, Mr. Endicott.
Why'd you two come here?
To ask you about Mr. Colbert.
Let me understand this. You two came here to question me?
Well, your attitudes, Mr. Endicott, your points of view are a matter of record. Some people, well, let us say the people who work for Mr. Colbert might reasonably regard you as the person least likely to mourn his passing. We were just trying to clarify some of the evidence. Was Mr. Colbert ever in this greenhouse, say last night about midnight?
Gillespie? Yeah. You saw it.
I saw it.
Well, what are you gonna do about it?
I don't know.
I'll remember that. There was a time
I could have had you shot.
When this film's written about and talked about, one of the descriptions that comes up a lot is Poitier's dignity. In fact, that's a descriptor for much of Poitier's 60s career. And I find it patronizing and insulting in a way. There is some truth to it. There was a palatability to his performances that white audiences could accept. But there's more to it. Have you seen A Raisin in the Sun? And there's more to it here. You'll see things written about the film with Poitier's stylishness, the way he's dressed in suits, comparing him to the sort of rednecks and yokels around him and how dignified he was. But in this film, he's not only dignified, he's raging. There's a seething rage underneath the surface it's not even underneath the surface, it's barely contained, and it's from that opening scene. Earlier, I described it as frustration. It's not frustration, it's rage. And there are reasons for it, right? 300 years plus of history is one of the reasons. But also the way Tibbs has been treated. But also the way Poitier had been treated. This film was shot in Sparta, Illinois. Poitier refused to shoot in the South because he'd been the victim of racial crime. He and his friend Harry Belafonte were almost murdered by Klansmen in Georgia. So when Norman Jewison approached him to do a film set in the Deep South, he's like, okay, but I'm not filming there. They actually ended up convincing him to film a little bit of it in Tennessee. Those scenes of the cotton pickers, that's from Tennessee. And Poitier later said that during that whole brief stint in Tennessee, he slept with a gun under his pillow. And that rage comes out in this performance as well. And that rage is there in that slap. And I want to talk about that slap for a little bit because it comes up a lot as a shocking moment in the film. And it is a shock. Well, let's say it's a surprise. It's a surprise because culturally, viewers, especially white viewers at the time, might not have expected it, might not have wanted it. And I would guess that black viewers at the time would not have expected it at all. Their reactions were probably very different, but it would have been a surprise. But it shouldn't have been a shock in terms of the story because everything up to that point, and this is not a key narrative point in the film, it comes about halfway through and the film changes quite a bit after that. But it's a key moment thematically in the film because it tells us who Virgil Tibbs is. Yes, he's been sent down here, or he's been ordered to stay here by his boss. Yes, he's very good at his job. Yes, he's gonna bite his tongue most of the time and do his job professionally, but he's not gonna stand for that shit. And one of the things that's great about the scene is that it allows the audience to catch our breath because after the slap, there's a moment of silence. And then there's actually a discussion. Did you see that? They're talking to each other, but they're talking to us too. Did you see that? But it shouldn't be a shock in terms of the narrative because everything we've seen about Tibbs leading up to that point should tell us that's how he'll respond. He's a cop. You don't slap him. And I would argue that the reason it's shocking to viewers, even still today, is not because what happens in the story, but because of our own preconceptions about the film, because of our own preconceptions about Tibbs, and because of our own preconceptions still today about race and race relations in America. This film is also often discussed in the context of two other films that came out the same year, Bonnie and Clyde and The Graduate. And oftentimes you'll hear critics of the era, and still critics today, say, in the heat of the night, it's too middlebrow. It wears its heart on its sleeve. It's too obvious. But what I would argue is that this film is, culturally at least, a lot more groundbreaking than those two films, especially at least The Graduate, in the way that it marries a simple police story, yes, with some good old-fashioned liberal white guilt, yes, but with a visual and cinematic exploration of Black invisibility and Black rage. And those things are still relevant today. Much more so, I would argue, than the other two films. And in a lot of ways, it's a better film to watch today than the other two films because the issues that it's grappling with so fiercely have not gone away. Look around you. And when critics are talking about it this way as a sort of middle-brow film, one of the things they talk about a lot is the film's unfortunate usage of the black savior trope or even the magical Negro. I don't think In the Heat of the Night is that kind of movie. Tibbs's whole presence in this film is a disruption that's meant to be swept away. He will become again invisible. Much like the black people in town. It's another one of the political edges of the film that I think people overlook. This is a film about a white man's murder and an investigation by white police, with one exception, where, for the most part, the black residents of the town are invisible. And yet, throughout the film, in key moments, we meet African-American townspeople who are not only important to Tibbs's case, but through whose labor the town is able to function. The most obvious is the people in the fields picking the cotton who make Endicott rich. They're the anonymous, marginalized labor that the film itself doesn't tell us anything about. Then there's Jess, the mechanic, played by Khalil Bezaleel, who Gillespie takes Tibbs to for a car. There's an implication here that this is a person who knows cars, who keeps cars running. There's Endicott's butler, Justin Harrison, who doesn't get a lot to do, but gets this great little moment. He's a man who keeps the big house running. And then there's Bea Richards as Mama Kaleba. Because, this isn't just a film about race relations. This isn't just a film about Southern violence. It's also a film about abortion. And when white women in the town of Sparta need an abortion, who do you think they turn to? In this town, the white people are incompetent. Gillespie arrests two different people who, on cursory questioning and simple examination, could not have been the criminal. The black people run the town. Now, the film never comes out right and says this. It never makes this argument, but it's there in the filming and it's there in their presence on the margins. But every time something needs doing in Sparta, a black person gets it done. So when you watch In the Heat of the Night, and I highly recommend it, this is not a film that should be overlooked. Enjoy the police procedural, thrill at these performances, thrill at the beautiful, incredible cinematography, the precise editing of Ashby, Ray Charles' music, which I didn't even have time to talk about. But look at the undercurrent. What do these beautiful shots tell us? What does this jarring editing tell us? They're telling us a story that runs alongside the story, that complements the story, that deepens the story, and makes it more than just an attempt to assuage liberal guilt in 1967. It makes it a story, I think, that doesn't let liberal whites off the hook. Tell me what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear any thoughts about this fantastic film. Until next time, that's all for now. My name's Aaron Hunter. Thanks for watching.